The latest Yougov poll indicates that the Burnham bounce is starting to drop as Reform UK has reclaimed its lead over Labour.
Well, last week, Prime Minister Andy Burnham ended Reform UK's long-standing dominance in the polls, which marked the first time the party fell to second place in the past 16 months.
So, do the recent fluctuations suggest Burnham's popularity is starting to flatline?
Well, let's speak now to Julian Galley, Head of Research at Merlin Strategy, who joins us now. Very good morning to you, Julian. It looks like this Burnham bounce has been...
Well, there you go. This is GB News Originals. I'm Emily Carver. Please do give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. And do leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Do you think...
Very brief.
Yeah, so we see in the Yougov poll that Reform have taken its lead. In other polls, Labour keeps a very small lead. They're on around 27%. In the average polling, we see both Reform and Labour very close to each other. So there has been a slight bounce for Labour, but that bounce has sort of taken them up to where Reform are and not beyond by much.
So where does this leave really the three main parties in terms of strategy? Because if there was, everyone's calling for an election pretty much, apart from the Tories. And if there was one today, what are we looking at? A hung parliament?
Yeah, so it's quite difficult to tell, but what the Labour strategy would be is actually quite similar to 2024, where their vote share might not be incredibly high, but what they will be looking for is an efficient vote spread across the country. So if, for example, in London, their vote share isn't as high as it has been in previous years, under the Corbyn years, for example, because the Greens are picking up votes and they've gone from winning sort of 70% in, the sort of Islingtons, North Londons, places like Keir Starmer's constituency, and they've gone from winning 70% to maybe 45, 50%, they'll still win the seat. But if that means they lose votes in London but win more votes elsewhere in marginal seats, whereas the right is split between Reform and Labour, between Reform and the Conservatives, I should say, Labour would fancy their chances at sort of winning with a split right where they get more seats under a low vote share.
Well, there has been talk this week, hasn't there, about a Reform Restore pact. What difference would that make to Reform's lead?
Yeah, so we see across different polls, some pollsters prompt for Reform, some do not. But we see that Restore maybe on between 2 to 4% of the vote share. So it could have an impact on Reform, especially in very marginal seats. But overall, what the bigger problem is that Reform are on 24, 25%, Conservatives on about 20%. And we see that the Conservative ceiling is perhaps not as high as the Reform ceiling, but the Conservative floor is actually a lot higher than people first predicted maybe a couple of years ago. So it's very unlikely that the Conservatives will drop down enough to have a clear pathway for Reform in a lot of seats.
What's interesting with this is, and why I guess it's difficult for pollsters, is that there's a big difference between what people say in a poll to what they finally plump for when they're stood at the ballot box. Can you factor that in any way, shape or form?
Yeah, so we have different methods to see what maybe people might be considering on a scale of 1 to 10, how certain they are to vote a certain way, how certain they are to vote at all, because a lot of people might say that they're going to vote for one party, but then on the day they just can't really be bothered and they stay at home. So we have different methods to factor all of that in. And one of the big ones is tactical voting. So we've seen in Manchester, in Makerfield, the Manchester mayoral election, that the Conservative vote has actually dropped down quite a bit. And that's partly because a lot of Conservatives are voting with Reform against Labour, but also we've seen quite a few Conservatives voting against Reform and supporting Labour because they would prefer a Labour government or a Labour mayor, a Labour MP to a Reform MP. And that's quite a big issue for Reform, and it's a big issue in terms of determining where the next election will go.
OK, Julian Galley, really good to get your analysis this morning. Thank you very much.
Behind the Downing Street hype as national debt soars and political polls volley Westminster. Welcome to another edition of Britain Underneath, where we peel back the polished gloss of Westminster to uncover the real mechanics driving British power today. If you appreciate sharp, uncompromising political breakdown, do take a moment to subscribe right now, as it truly helps keep this channel alive and independent. Today, let us dive straight into the growing storm inside number 10 Downing Street, where the political honeymoon appears to be crashing into hard economic walls. The political atmosphere in the United Kingdom is shifting with astonishing speed, leaving political strategists frantically recalculating their next moves. For a brief moment, the entrance of Prime Minister Andy Burnham into Downing Street seemed to give the Labour Party a fresh breath of momentum. Westminster commentators were quick to brand it the Burnham bounce, declaring that the government had finally found a narrative capable of halting the persistent rise of Reform UK. But as the latest polling numbers filter through from Yougov and other major polling institutions, that initial surge appears to be flattening out, leaving the political landscape in a tense, unpredictable stalemate. The numbers tell a story of a deeply divided electorate. While initial polling gave Labour a fleeting bump, Reform UK has rapidly reclaimed its lead in key polling metrics, with both major forces trading blows within the narrow margin of roughly 24 to 27%. Meanwhile, the Conservative Party finds itself anchored near 20%. It is a three-way dynamic that British politics has rarely witnessed in modern history, creating unprecedented complexity for party strategists ahead of future electoral contests. Take a breath, stay informed, and consider subscribing to Britain Underneath if you want to keep tracking these seismic political shifts as they unfold. To understand why this polling wobble matters so much, one must look at how the mathematics of the British electoral system actually operate. Labour's strategy relies heavily on maintaining an efficient distribution of votes across crucial marginal constituencies, rather than relying on massive overall totals in traditional strongholds. In places like London, where urban vote shares have historically been overwhelming, minor slips to parties like the Greens do not necessarily cost seats. However, in the former industrial heartlands and suburban battlegrounds, any split on the right side of the spectrum between Reform UK and the Conservatives completely alters the calculus. Yet, the idea that the right-wing vote will simply split down the middle and hand the government an easy ride is proving to be a dangerous assumption. Polling analysts point out that while the Conservative ceiling may be lower than in previous decades, their electoral floor remains remarkably resilient.
We're now borrowing £4,000 a second.
Oof.
Yeah, eye-watering, isn't it? And there's various calculations that extrapolate that out to what that costs every household, and that's eye-watering as well. And we're running at 100% of GDP in national debt, and that's a completely unsustainable position. And you've got a new Prime Minister who's come to office who's been on a spending spree. I suspect probably the most relieved person in the country at the moment is the Chancellor that the Prime Minister's gone on holiday, because that at least gives him a respite of a couple of weeks to work out how the hell he's going to pay for this when it comes to the budget. But it's same old Labour, isn't it? You know, it's what they do. Spend more money, borrow more, tax us more and drive unemployment.
But if you're borrowing more, it's not necessarily a bad thing if you're borrowing more in the short term to do things which will stimulate the economy.
But it's how you're going to pay for it and not spooking the markets.
But
Not see all of us get whacked.
How, it isn't said here, how long is it for? Is this temporary borrowing that's over within the week, within the month, or are we looking at the next 6 months? I think that's a crucial detail that you need to think about.
Oh, that is. And also, I mean, how do they visualise it stimulating the economy?
Well, these are exactly the sorts of questions that if the Prime Minister has had the decency to front up to Parliament would have been able to be asked. And I think it's complete dereliction of duty to have been appointed as Prime Minister once Parliament had gone into recess and then not to come back, because the country does need certainty. We do need answers to these questions, and I think that would help to settle some of the market anxiety about this as well.
Nikki, let's look at something totally different, shall we, in the Telegraph today. How do you feel about self-driving taxis?
I was really thinking about this because I don't drive.
At the same time, discussions surrounding potential electoral arrangements or tactical cooperation between smaller right-leaning movements could squeeze marginal seats even further. The reality on the ground is that voters are increasingly engaging in strategic decision-making at the ballot box, balancing local priorities against national frustrations. While party strategists debate polling trends, a far more severe challenge is brewing behind the doors of the Treasury. National balance sheets are facing intense strain as government borrowing figures reach eye-watering levels. Financial analysts calculate that public sector borrowing is currently running at an incredible rate of roughly £4,000 every single second. This relentless pace has pushed total national debt to 100% of gross domestic product, a threshold that historically triggers alarm bells across global money markets. This level of debt creates an uncomfortable dilemma for the administration. Prime Minister Burnham arrived in office with big promises of renewed public investment, regional development, and an expansive agenda to lift living standards across the regions. Yet every single pound spent must ultimately be financed through either increased taxation or additional borrowing in the international bond markets. With debt interest payments climbing into billions of pounds each month, the Chancellor of the Exchequer faces an immensely delicate balancing act ahead of the upcoming fiscal budget. The tension between spending commitments and fiscal reality is already causing anxiety among economic observers. If borrowing continues to rise without a clear, credible plan for long-term growth, the risk of market volatility becomes very real. Investors remember all too well how quickly international markets can react when government spending plans outpace revenue projections. The government's challenge is not merely convincing the electorate that its programs are desirable, but reassuring institutional investors that the national finances remain on a stable and predictable trajectory. Adding to the sense of political friction is the timing of these financial revelations. With Parliament in recess during the height of summer, critics argue that crucial questions regarding national economic strategy are going unanswered. Opponents contend that announcing major fiscal directions or entering new public commitments without direct parliamentary scrutiny leaves the public in the dark. For a government that promised transparency and stability, the lack of immediate parliamentary debate on rising borrowing costs provides easy ammunition for political rivals across the aisle. Beyond the corridors of Westminster and the trading floors of the City of London, broader societal shifts are quietly taking shape. As the government grapples with macroeconomic pressures, long-term infrastructure projects and technological initiatives continue to move forward in the background. Take, for instance, the recent quiet expansion of autonomous vehicle testing on the streets of major cities like London. While political headlines remain dominated by fiscal deficits and party infighting, quiet transformations in transport, technology, and public services are laying the groundwork for the nation's future economy. These technological transitions highlight a broader truth about modern governance. While political leaders focus on day-to-day survival and news management, the fundamental structure of the country's economy is evolving rapidly. Whether it is energy grid modernization, digital infrastructure, or autonomous transport networks, the capital required to keep the United Kingdom competitive on the global stage is immense. And that brings the debate squarely back to the same fundamental question. How will these massive long-term investments be funded when national debt is already matching total economic output?
The current landscape leaves British politics at a critical crossroads. The government faces a dual test of political authority and economic management. On one side, it must convince a sceptical, highly fractured electorate that its policies will deliver tangible improvements to everyday life despite tight financial constraints. On the other side, it must navigate a hyper-competitive political arena where minor polling shifts can dramatically alter parliamentary projections and party morale. For opposition parties, the current moment presents both opportunities and hazards. Reform UK continues to challenge established political norms, capitalising on public frustration over public spending, taxation and immigration. The Conservative Party, while working to rebuild its core support, retains a substantial base that prevents easy political realignments. As tactical voting becomes a permanent feature of British elections, predicting the outcome of future parliamentary contests becomes a matter of fine margins and unpredictable voter behaviour. Autumn approaches and Parliament prepares to reconvene, the pressure on Downing Street will only intensify. The upcoming budget will serve as the ultimate reality check for the government's ambitions, forcing a definitive choice between fiscal discipline and expansive public programmes. How the Prime Minister and the Chancellor address these competing pressures will shape the political narrative for years to come. Please take a moment to subscribe to Britain Underneath right now so you never miss our in-depth political breakdowns. Stay informed, stay critical, and join us in the next video as we continue to track the power dynamics shaping the nation. The crumbling pillars of British justice, early prison releases, police outrage, and the Chris Carber fallout. Welcome back to Britain Underneath, the home for sharp, uncompromising political analysis, where we look beneath the polished surface of Westminster and reveal the raw realities shaping our nation today. Before we dive into the heart of today's story, if you value serious, mature, and independent commentary on the standard of governance in the United Kingdom, please consider hitting the subscribe button and switching on notifications. Your support is the single most vital force helping this channel grow, bringing you the truth behind the headlines every single week. So please do subscribe now to support our work. Let us now examine a justice system that appears to be fracturing at its very foundations. Across the United Kingdom, a quiet crisis has escalated into an outright confrontation between law enforcement, political leadership, and the public. The headlines in recent days have exposed a criminal justice framework stretched to its absolute limit, leaving citizens wondering whether the balance of fairness has tipped away from protecting the innocent. At the centre of this storm is the controversial Early Prison Release Initiative, designed to alleviate severe overcrowding in Britain's correctional facilities. However, the operational execution of this policy has drawn ferocious criticism from police federations, senior officers, and advocacy groups who argue that short-term administrative convenience is being prioritised over public safety. The tension reached a boiling point when representatives from law enforcement openly voiced dismay over the potential early release of individuals convicted in connection with severe crimes, including the tragic killing of Police Constable Andrew Harper. To see frontline officers and senior leadership publicise their lack of confidence in executive decisions is an extraordinary moment in modern British political history. When those tasked with maintaining order lose faith in the system that enforces it, the social contract itself begins to fray. It signals to the public that the government is managing symptoms rather than resolving fundamental structural defects. Take a moment to reflect on what this means for local communities when thousands of offenders are returned to society earlier than intended. Beyond the immediate friction with law enforcement, the policy has raised significant concerns regarding the release of individuals with histories of domestic abuse and non-violent offences. While officials insist that rigorous risk assessments are conducted prior to any release, past instances where individuals breached their conditions shortly after leaving custody have done little to reassure the public. Critics argue that probation services, already under immense pressure and resource constraints, are simply not equipped to monitor an influx of early releases effectively. When monitoring systems fail, the burden falls directly back onto frontline police officers and vulnerable victims who are left feeling exposed and disregarded by the state. If you are finding this breakdown insightful and want to stay informed on the issues that directly impact your safety and governance, please pause for a second, take a breath, and hit that subscribe button. It takes only a moment, but subscribing genuinely helps keep this channel independent and thriving. As if the prison capacity crisis were not enough to destabilise public trust, the prolonged aftermath of high-profile police operations continues to cast a long shadow over British law enforcement. The recent decision by the Independent Office for Police Conduct regarding firearms officer NX121, involved in the tragic shooting of Chris Carber, marks the conclusion of a 4-year legal ordeal. While the jury cleared the officer of murder in a matter of hours, The institutional process required 4 full years to deliver a definitive administrative conclusion. This prolonged uncertainty has sparked intense debate over how the United Kingdom investigates its own firearms officers. The core argument surrounding this case is not merely about a single incident, but about the systemic strain placed on specialised officers who must make split-second decisions under life-threatening conditions. When an officer faces years of legal jeopardy, potential career destruction, and public condemnation before a final verdict is reached, it creates a chilling effect across the entire force. Senior figures within policing have expressed concern that highly trained officers may begin to hesitate in critical moments, worried more about legal repercussions than protecting the public or themselves. A police force hesitant to act due to administrative fear is a force rendered fundamentally less effective. At the same time, the broader debate highlights the delicate balance between accountability and support for law enforcement. Communities legitimately demand transparency, rigour, and impartiality when a citizen loses their life during a police operation. However, when investigative processes stretch over several years, the process itself becomes a form of punishment for everyone involved, including the family of the deceased, who are left waiting years for final closure. The current framework appears to satisfy no one, leaving both police officers and local communities feeling alienated by an overly bureaucratic apparatus that moves at a sluggish pace. This broader environment of institutional hesitation and political manoeuvring raises difficult questions about the direction of governance in modern Britain. When political leaders choose to avoid direct scrutiny during times of policy implementation, public scepticism naturally deepens. The absence of clear, unequivocal communication from government ministers regarding which offences qualify for early release has allowed confusion and alarm to spread. Transparent leadership requires facing difficult questions directly, rather than relying on carefully managed public statements while key figures are away from the front line. Consider the reality facing the average citizen today. On one hand, taxpayers are told that court backlogs are at historic highs, prisons are overflowing, and early releases are an unavoidable necessity. On the other hand, citizens observe that when law enforcement officers perform their duties under extreme stress, the legal system takes years to resolve their status. This stark contrast illustrates a profound misalignment of priorities within the justice apparatus. It suggests a system that is reactive, risk-averse, and increasingly disconnected from the practical realities of community safety and public order. To truly understand Britain underneath the political rhetoric, one must examine the cumulative effect of these policies on national morale. A society functions smoothly when its citizens believe that wrongdoing is appropriately penalised, that victims are prioritised, and that those who enforce the law are treated fairly by the state. When any part of that equation breaks down, public confidence erodes rapidly. The current intersection of prison overcrowding, early release schemes, and protracted police investigations represents a critical test for the current administration, one that cannot be resolved through media management or temporary fixes. Rebuilding trust will require long-term structural investment in correctional infrastructure, comprehensive reform of investigative procedures for law enforcement, and a renewed commitment to prioritising victims' safety above administrative expediency. Until political leaders address these underlying structural flaws, the friction between government policy, police forces, and the public will only continue to intensify. It is precisely these deep structural issues that we will continue to monitor and analyse right here. As we navigate these complex political times together, staying informed with mature, balanced analysis is more important than ever. I strongly encourage you to watch our videos right through to the end so you never miss the critical context behind these major national developments. If you have made it this far, please take a moment to subscribe to Britain Underneath. Your subscription is essential for supporting our ongoing work and ensuring we can continue delivering the serious standard of commentary you deserve. Thank you for watching today.
Please subscribe now, stay informed, and make sure to return for our next analysis as we continue to uncover the truths shaping the United Kingdom.